Biafrans, listen, it is over for Nigeria. It is over for Nigeria. I don't know how you see it, but for me, I believe it is over. Some of us may say, why is it only sanction? Yes, you see this sanction, let me tell you, something that will trigger Nigeria, something that will trigger Trump and America not to have any other option than to call for Nigeria disintegration will definitely happen. I don't want to talk too much. After you listen to this bishop, there is another video following it that you will listen to. You understand? So what you help me do in this channel is to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification button, share the video, like the video, so that it will help YouTube to recommend the video to other Biafrans. Thank you and God bless you.
I am Wilfred Chikbana, but not appear here as the bishop, the Catholic Bishop of Makurdi Diocese, the capital of Benue State in Nigeria. I am the shepherd of one of the 4 dioceses, Catholic dioceses in Benue. We have others, Anglican, Methodist, and Pentecostals, which certainly Benue State has a population of about 6.1 million people, 2 million of whom are those under my care as the bishop of the diocese. Benue State is about 98% Christian, with very few Muslims living in towns. Nigeria and eventually my diocese and the state of Benue have become, in recent years, one of the most dangerous and insecure places for Christians. Christians and Muslims are nearly evenly divided among Nigeria's large population of over 200 million persons. Islamist extremists are fiercely contesting the possession, control, and governing law of the land, especially in the country's northern and central regions, the latter of which is where Benue is located. There are constant ethnic, political, and religious conflicts over land and allegiance. Constitutionally, we are a secularist country, but our unity has been fragile. Political and religious actions and even public speech have been carefully managed to avoid accusations of religious bias and political tensions. Today, the clear influence of Islamist extremists has changed the traditional social dynamics of tribe, ethnicity, religion, and the social status in Nigeria. Because just recently, at the beginning of the Ramadan fast, 12 states in northern Nigeria have declared closed schools so that they attend to this. And you can imagine which other country in the world does that. Saudi Arabia is not doing it. Afghanistan is not doing it. Baghdad is not doing it, but then Nigeria is practicing. What kind of Islam are they practicing? 12 states, and not only Muslims are living in these places. What happens with the educational program or curriculum of the country? But this is what we are going through every day in Nigeria. A long-term Islamic agenda to homogenize the population has been implemented over several presidencies through a strategy to reduce and eventually eliminate the Christian identity of half of the population. This strategy includes both violent and non-violent actions, such as the exclusion of Christians from positions of power and adoption of such church members, the raping of women, the killing and exploitation of Christians, the destruction of churches and farmlands of Christian farmers, followed by the occupation of such lands by the Fulani herders, and also changing the names of these villages. They are taking over the places, so you clearly see an expansionist approach and Islamic, and then they are making the people now flee and leave their villages and they conquer it. The quest to Islamalize the land appears high on the agenda of some of the powerful and influential Muslims in Nigeria. There is a campaign to take land to spread Islam, and there is the hemorrhaging of Christian farmers from the central region of Nigeria and Benue State, and Makurdi Diocese in particular, as they are forced to abandon fertile lands that use to feed the nation, which classify Benue as the food basket of the nation. Militant Fulani herdsmen are terrorists destroying society. They steal and vandalize, they kill and boast about it. They kidnap and rape, and they enjoy total impunity from the elected authorities. None of them have been arrested and brought to justice. This is supported by the corrupt system in which we operate and the abject poverty among us, which allow the criminal to easily attract more recruits and prey on more victims. Why is this happening? Is it really a religious war? Like in the past, many jihadists are motivated less by religion than by spoils of war and use their religion to impose themselves. In my diocese, the spoils consist mainly of fertile, well-tended land organized around my parishes or so. The jihadists come and adopt and kill the priests, leaving thousands without support and basic human services. And of course, when they disperse the people, the inhabitants, or the citizens, or the people of the lands, they take over. And any attempt to go back and take care of your farms, surely you get killed. The Makurdi Diocese in Benue State has been the epicenter of the invasion by these herders who are more like hired guns of cattle oligarchies, who manipulate religion to rally the herders to eliminate the Christian population and cleanse the land in the name of Islam. This objective is behind the relentless attacks against Benue's villages. When we call for help to the police and the army, they do not come. At the end of 2024, several villages were warned by the attackers of the upcoming violence, and the leaders called the police for defense ahead of time, but they did not come, and the Christian massacres, almost customary, took place, killing hundreds in Plateau and Benue, with the worst massacre claiming 47 people. The militant also burned down the 8 Catholic churches of St. Mary's Parish in the Diocese of Boko, which in Benue State, as well as the parish house, clinics, schools, and other houses. The militant Fulani herdsmen bear on defenseless villagers without consequences. They follow orders to conquer, kill, and occupy. They attack even those who have managed to escape into our IDP camps. Thereby, they have no place to run to. And it is unfortunate that the police system in Nigeria, orders have to come from above. And such that once there's a call, and they say they have never responded. And by the time they arrive, these people have left, and the people are now living in the pool of their blood. What I have recounted above is happening not only in Benue State. I believe our experience in Benue is symptomatic of what is happening elsewhere in large parts of Nigeria. The experience of the Nigerian Christians today can be summed up as that of a church under Islamist extermination. It is frightening to live there. Apart from the violent campaigns and attacks against Christian villages, there are now attempts by the Islamic Council of Nigeria and various Islamic groups to impose Sharia law on the Christian populations. Already, 12 states in the north of Nigeria are under this sectarian religious law, and attempts to extend the same to the south of Nigeria, which they have started. This month, governors in the north decided appropriately to close all schools and education institutions during the months of Ramadan, leaving millions of students without learning opportunity for 5 weeks. We live in fear because at any point it can be our turn to be killed, but to remain silent is to die twice. So, I have chosen to speak. I speak on behalf of the millions who are in the camps. In Benue State, in Makurdi Diocese alone, in my diocese, I have about 9 camps. 9. On the 5th of March, which was Ash Wednesday, we visited one of the camps, and many of my priests and religious went to the other camps, distributed them to begin the Ash Wednesday with our faithful who are there, because we are the voice of the voiceless. We have to talk for the defenseless. We have to talk about the weak and those who cannot talk about themselves. In one of the camps called the Mega Camp, there were over 3,000 inmates of that camp, and which was a record given to us by government. I speak on behalf of them and those children who have no husband, who have no father, and even their own voices taken away by the politicians who promised to help them, but have become the willing tools of the jihadists because they are talking politically correct statements, looking for next elections to come. I speak on behalf of those whose loved ones have been killed, but no one has even offered a word of consolation to them. I speak on behalf of the thousands of young girls who have been adopted and raped because no one, not even the media, mentions them anymore. Foremost, I speak on behalf of my flock, who are unable to worship freely and unable to return to their ancestral farms and homes because that land has been ruthlessly taken from them by the armed herdsmen. And where they say they want to live in peace with the natives, if you must farm, you have to pay tax to hire the land which belongs to you. That is slavery, to say the least about it. As prosperous Nigeria is in the African continent, and I tell you, if there's outbreak of war in Nigeria, no country around us, Chad, Niger, Ghana, Guinea, Togo, no country can contain the population that will flee to these places. No country can be able to house over 5 million refugees. It's not possible because of that. And if 1 million refugees run to Chad and Niger, they'll collapse that country because there'll be no plan to take care of them. So we have to be very careful. Today, I urge you all to use every means within your mandate to start developing a strong and good relationship with Nigeria, where you know that when you speak of human dignity, you are also speaking of the same God-given right you believe is unalienable. Consider that Nigeria can be your ally, but it cannot be one where half the population is in the process of being murderously eliminated. Work with us, the churches, and other Nigerians of goodwill. We are working for a peaceful and prosperous society, and our desperate plight has been set aside in U.S. foreign policy for too long, to the cost of thousands of lives. Concretely, I request and I plead, I ask you to redesignate Nigeria as a country of particular concern. This has both a practical and diplomatic meaning to signal that you are paying attention to what happens to us and elsewhere in the world. Because the policies the government is trying to put in place, so that to return the IDPs, build camps for them, relocate them from their homes, it is not durable and it will not work, because the government has already the population that is not able to take care of. And then you have over millions of people in the camps, and you want to relocate them to where? And if you do, let's take that you do. How many houses or rooms will you give me who has 5 children, another one has 3, another one has 2, and what will I be doing for a living? These people previously never begged anybody for food. They were managing their lives, training their children, and building their homes. So nobody should have deceived us on the guys that you're going to resettle the IDPs. They have no jobs. So where you say them, what will be their place? And by the way, the fundamental question remains, if you resettle them to other camps or build places for them, what happens with the ancestral lands? Who takes care of them? And this is whereby I feel the government is complicit on this issue. Because these terrorists, Fulanis, displace them, kill people, and then occupy the place, and then change names, nomenclatures of these towns. For what reason? So we want to let the people go back to their homes and help for them to rebuild their lives. I implore this august body to insist on the return and rehabilitation of all the IDPs to their ancestral lands, and not to relocate them to other constructed camps elsewhere, which is an invented solution now being pushed in the Benue State government. And I tell you, Nigeria government can do that once they have to be accountable. Because I know Nigeria, under the auspices of ECOMOG, was able to reinstate constitutional government in Sierra Leone and Liberia. And they can do that now. We have the capacity, but because the leaders that are not prepared. And I think that's whereby I look, it's not just, conspiracy of silence, it is aiding, abetting, and supporting these terrorists to keep doing their work. This is my plea. Thank you very much for this attention.
And changing the demography of Benue State. The Fulani terrorists want to seize the fertile lands of Benue, chase away the people from the land, and occupy the lands for themselves, he said. A 2023 study by Nigerian scholars on Plateau State found the great majority of Plateau's indigenous people from non-Fulani ethnic groups believe that Fulani violence is motivated by land grabbing, jihad, and Fulanization, compared with smaller percentages who blame cattle rustling. Cattle rustling does occur, but Fulani attacks are indiscriminate and devastate entire Christian villages. Ignoring citizens' appeals for help, Nigeria's government fails to effectively stop these attacks. Take Benue, where Catholic priests and other Christians were recently abducted in Fulani raids. A priest identified to the press 3 key areas along the Benue River, and he names them. It's in my testimony, where Fulani terrorists crossed from Nasarawa state to attack overwhelmingly Christian villages in Benue. The government ignores church pleas to place military posts near these known hotspots or have naval patrols on the river, a Benue priest told me. Or Kaduna, where on February 26th, Truth Nigeria reported over 200 Christians are being held hostage, starved, and tortured in a camp near an army base in a wooded area off the busy Kaduna-Abuja expressway. It came to light when 3 months after being abducted from their homes, 8 hostages in dire condition were released after a ransom payment of equivalent to $27,000 US. They had been chained, whipped, and starved and referred to as infidels by captives speaking the Fulani's Fulfulde language. They witnessed others dying from starvation or shot dead when the ransoms didn't come. And as far as we know, it's still there. And just last weekend, a Christian from Adamawa State, Sunday Jackson, had a death penalty upheld by the High Court of Nigeria for, in self-defense, killing an attacker on his property. The pontifical aid to the church in need counts scores of priests' kidnappings in Nigeria, with over 20 murdered in recent years. 7 Catholic priests have been kidnapped since January. A week ago, Father Sylvester of St. Mary's Church in Kaduna was kidnapped and slain. 2 pastors in Kaduna and Gombe states with the Evangelical Church of Winning All were murdered this year already. Abuja's Archbishop Kagame strongly criticized the escalating kidnappings of Catholic priests, citing, quote, poor leadership at all levels, local government, state government, and federal government. Some conclude that Abuja's passivity, including failing even to collect data on the attacks, shows government complicity. The board chair of the Nigerian private group International Society for Civil Liberties and the Rule of Law is among them. The State Department report on international religious freedom solely gives a neo-Marxian materialistic theory for Fulani aggression. It describes the relentless attacks against Christian farming families on their own farms and violence against priests and pastors in their church and rectories as clashes between 2 rural socioeconomic groups fighting over scarce natural resources, a result of climate change. It ignores the evidence. It overlooks possible radicalization of Fulani herdsmen who travel across porous borders in the Sahel and northeastern Nigeria, regions recognized by the U.S. government as terror hotbeds. It shows no concern for their automatic weapons, distributed reportedly by the Mayeti groups, the cattle breeders, lobbying association members. It disregards the Nigerian government's toleration of this violence by allowing it to continue with impunity. I therefore urge Congress to call for the State Department as a first step to designate Nigeria as a country of particular concern. I am certain that the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom will soon renew its recommendation of CPC designation for Nigeria. Placing Nigeria on the U.S.'s short list of the world's most egregious religious freedom violators is warranted and would be a foundation for further human rights initiatives by the new administration here. It is the law. It's standing up for religious freedom is part of American exceptionalism. It's part of our heritage, our traditions, and our Constitution to respect the unalienable right of religious freedom. That concludes my testimony. Thank you.
Ms. Shea, thank you so very much for your testimony, for your decades of dedication to this important issue. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Jacobs, and members of the subcommittee. First, let me thank you for your opening comments. It's refreshing to see we have agreement. We understand that there is a problem. Now coming to a solution is our challenge. So thank you for your insight. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is Tony Perkins. I served as a commissioner on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom from 2018 to 2022, And as the chairman said, I served as both chair and vice chair. From my time on USERF, I can tell you with certainty that the world is not paying enough attention to the growing humanitarian disaster in Nigeria. Despite its strategic importance as Africa's most populous country, these warning lights are flashing because of this systematic religious persecution driven primarily by Islamists, and it's going unaddressed. Christians are the primary targets. They're murdered, kidnapped, raped, and terrorized on almost a daily basis, as has already been discussed. The numbers are staggering. The brutality is unspeakable, and the silence from global leaders is deafening. Let me share just one recent example. On February 9th, Fulani terrorists armed with AK-47s, these are not hunting rifles, these are rifles designed to kill. I served, after coming out of the Marine Corps, I worked with the State Department in anti-terrorism and very familiar with the mode and operation of terrorists. They stormed a village in Gombe State. They first seized a 9-year-old boy from the Puma family and demanded ransom. They then sought out the Reverend Bala Galadima's home. They found him, they broke into his home, they demanded money. He pleaded with them, saying that he had none, but he offered them what he had. He had grain, so he offered them grain. They refused. They shot him 3 times, killing him. Sadly, this is not an isolated incident. In late January, Boko Haram launched a series of coordinated attacks on Christian villages in Chibok, the same region where 276 schoolgirls were kidnapped in 2014, Mr. Chairman. You'll remember that. We discussed it then. In fact, many of those girls remain captives to this day. The terrorists set homes and churches ablaze, destroyed livestock, and demanded that Christians convert or they die. More than 4,000 believers have been forced to flee for their lives in recent weeks alone. As has been mentioned, according to Open Doors, more Christians are murdered for their faith in Nigeria than any other country in the world. In 2024 alone, 3,100 Christians were killed. 2,830 were kidnapped. These are not just numbers. These are fathers, their mothers, their children, their families. The case of Leah Sheribu underscores the horror of this crisis. Leah was just 14 years old when Boko Haram kidnapped her and 108 other girls from their school in 2018. The terrorists eventually released all the girls except Leah. Why? Because she refused to renounce her Christian faith. Reports suggest she is still alive and now held as a prize by her captors, as she has been forced to bear children in captivity. As a commissioner on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, I met with her family multiple times and worked with the previous administration to track her, hopefully trying to gain her freedom. We were not successful. This is what religious persecution in Nigeria looks like. It is violent, it is brutal, and it is worsening. In 2020, the Trump administration, based on recommendations from USERF, and I was a part of that leadership team, Nigeria was designated as a country of particular concern. This was an essential step, recognizing the Nigerian government was failing to protect religious minorities from systematic violence. Yet in 2021, the Biden administration inexplicably removed Nigeria's CPC designation, despite the fact that attack against Christians had increased. Former Secretary of State Antony Blinken later suggested in a meeting with USERF members, which I was present, that these massacres were caused by climate change, that desperate Fulani herders were simply looking for pasture land. Let me be clear, this is not about climate change. It's about a violent extremist ideology that seeks to eliminate Christianity from Nigeria's northern and central regions. The evidence is undeniable. This is systematic religious violence. The U.S. government must act, and they must act now. Nigeria must be redesignated a country of particular concern. The Biden administration's removal of this designation was a reckless mistake that emboldened the very terrorists who are slaughtering Christians. The evidence overwhelmingly meets the legal threshold under the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, which requires CPC status for governments that engage in or tolerate tolerate severe violations of religious freedom. That's exactly what Nigeria's government has done. It has failed to protect all of its citizens from religious violence. The U.S. must impose consequences. Under the International Religious Freedom Act, the President has the authority to take action against CPC-designated nations, including economic penalties. The U.S. should apply targeted sanctions against Nigerian officials who are complicit in religious persecution, as well as suspend certain trade benefits until concrete actions are taken to protect all Nigerians. Religious freedom protection must be tied to U.S.-Nigerian relations. The administration should make it clear that Nigeria's treatment of religious minorities will directly impact diplomatic and economic relations, including trade agreements and security assistance. And finally, the U.S. must reappoint a strong, high-profile ambassador for international religious freedom. During the first Trump administration, this role was used effectively under the leadership of Ambassador Sam Brownback to apply global pressure on persecuting nations. The momentum for that must be regained. In closing, Mr. Chairman, it is time for the United States to send an unmistakable message, to draw a red line. The slaughter of Christians and other religious minorities in Nigeria will not be tolerated. If Nigeria continues to allow terrorists to burn churches, execute pastors, and kidnap schoolgirls with impunity, there must be consequences. This is not just about Nigeria. It is about the future of religious freedom, the stability of Africa, the moral credibility of the United States. If we fail to act, make no mistake about it, this crisis will spread. Refugees will flood into neighboring countries. Terrorists will grow bolder. And America's silence will embolden jihadists worldwide. Chairman Smith, members of the committee, thank you for helping raise awareness of the need to redesignate Nigeria as a country of particular concern. The world is watching, but more importantly, the religious persecution and those who are the victims of that in Nigeria are watching. They're waiting to see if America will stand with them and for them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins, for your testimony and your leadership as well. And your work on the Religious Freedom Commission was legendary. We do have Maureen Ferguson here with us today, who's a commissioner on the Religious Freedom Commission. Dominic Cuso, who's a pastor from my district, who's very involved with the religious freedom issue. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to just point out David Trimble is here as well from RFI. When I did the bill in 2019, it was a religious freedom, Frank Wolf, we named it after Frank Wolf. Got it passed in the Senate. It was dead in the water on the Senate side, and he did so much to get it passed, and I want to thank him for that, because otherwise it would have been just another House-passed bill, like we all know. It goes over to the Senate, and that's the graveyard of legislation, but I want to thank him for what he did to get that through. I'd like to now recognize, and again, thank him profusely for traveling here and at great risk